Have you ever tried sleeping on the frozen ground when the temperature drops well below minus 30 degrees? Most unprepared people in such conditions would not only freeze, but would suffer fatal hypothermia in a matter of hours, even if they were dressed warmly. Frozen ground draws life out of the human body at an alarming rate, acting as an endless heat sink that cannot be negotiated with. However, the indigenous peoples of North America have spent centuries sleeping in such conditions, waking up in the morning refreshed and full of energy for hunting or traveling. Their secret was not supernatural endurance, but a deep understanding of the physics of cold and the ability to use simple materials to create sophisticated thermal insulation systems. Watch the video to the end to learn how ordinary dry grass and bison hides were transformed into an engineering structure capable of retaining heat better than modern sleeping bags. What if I told you that a nomad's most dangerous enemy was not the icy wind, but the ground beneath their feet? We are used to thinking that we freeze from the cold air that blows over our bodies and penetrates our clothing. But in fact, air is a rather poor conductor of heat and can be relatively easily insulated with clothing. The ground, especially when frozen solid, has enormous heat capacity and thermal conductivity, acting like a giant pump. As soon as a warm body touches a cold surface, the process of conduction begins, whereby heat is instantly transferred to the ground. This process cannot be stopped by simply adding more blankets on top, as they do not protect against heat loss from below. A person lying on the ground is trying to warm the entire planet with their body, which is, of course, a losing battle. The energy needed to maintain body temperature is consumed at a catastrophic rate, leading to the depletion of the body's reserves. This is why many travelers who had warm jackets but did not take care of bedding died of cold while sleeping. The indigenous peoples of the Great Plains were well aware of this physical law long before the advent of thermodynamics. They knew that death comes from below, and the main rule of survival was to create a reliable barrier between man and the earth. Their philosophy of sleep was based not on covering oneself from above, but on insulating oneself from below, which fundamentally distinguished their approach from the European one. Even the warmest bison fur would be useless if it were simply spread out on bare ice or snow. Insulation required the creation of a layer that would not only separate the body from the ground, but also trap warm air inside. This required an understanding of the properties of various materials available in the sparse nature of the steppes and forests. The Indians used multi-layered structures where each layer performed a specific function in the overall heat retention system. A mistake in the choice of material or incorrect layering could cost the health or even the life of the entire family. The winter camps of the Lakota or Cheyenne were often located in places where the ground froze to a depth of a meter or more. In such conditions, the floor of a teepee was not just a surface, but a hostile environment that needed to be neutralized. Preparing the sleeping area was a daily ritual whose importance cannot be overestimated, as the outcome of the night depended on it. It was an art passed down from generation to generation and honed by centuries of survival in a harsh climate. Europeans encountering the lifestyle of the Indians for the first time were often surprised at how much attention was paid to preparing the bed. It seemed strange to them that warriors would spend time gathering branches and grass when they could simply wrap themselves in a blanket. However, after their first night on the frozen ground, skepticism gave way to respect for the wisdom of the locals. It became clear that a comfortable night's sleep on the prairie was not a luxury, but a basic requirement for maintaining combat readiness. The cold of the earth is insidious in that it penetrates the body imperceptibly, gradually slowing down blood circulation and depressing metabolism. A person may not even wake up, simply passing from a state of sleep to a state of deep hypothermia. The Indians knew the signs of this condition and did everything possible to prevent even the slightest possibility of hypothermia during sleep. Their methods were so effective that they allowed them to sleep without a fire even in the most severe frosts. Their entire culture was permeated with the idea of conserving energy, and sleep was a key moment for restoring strength. Losing heat at night meant having to consume more food during the day, which was problematic in winter. Therefore, the effectiveness of the sleeping area directly affected the tribe's food security and survival. It was a closed ecosystem where heat, food and sleep were inextricably linked. The understanding that the Earth was not a support, but an active heat absorber, changed the entire perception of the environment. Every stone, every patch of soil was considered in terms of its thermal conductivity and suitability for sleeping. This formed a special attitude towards space, where safety was measured by the thickness of the insulating layer. And now, centuries later, these principles remain unchanged for anyone who finds themselves in the wilderness in winter. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. Why do you think modern tourists often neglect insulation from below, relying only on sleeping bags? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next reviews. Guess how long it took to create the perfect sleeping base that didn't touch the ground? The first and most important layer in the Native American sleeping system was a rigid frame that created an air cushion. Plains tribes such as the Blackfoot and Arapaho made special mats from willow rods. Willow was chosen for a reason. Its branches were straight, flexible, and strong enough to support a person's weight without breaking. These rods were stripped of their bark and tied together with tendons to form a kind of mat or lattice. This construction raised the sleeper just a few centimeters above the ground, but that was enough to create a critically important air gap. The air trapped between the rods served as the first barrier against the cold coming from the frozen ground. In addition, this structure allowed moisture to escape down into the ground rather than accumulate under the body. Willow mats often had a unique shape. They were wider at the shoulders and narrowed towards the feet, repeating the contours of the human body. This saved material and space in the teepee, making the structure compact and easy to transport. At one end of the mat, a special triangular backrest tripod was often made, which served as a backrest during the day and a headboard at night. This structure was not just a bedding, but real furniture, a transformer that performed many functions in the confined space of a dwelling. Making such a mat required great skill and patience, as each rod had to be selected according to its thickness. The rods were tied together with jeweler's precision so that the mat remained flexible and could be rolled up when moving. The women of the tribe spent many hours preparing the vines and creating these household items, decorating them with geometric patterns. Each mat was a personalized item that served its owner for years. Unlike solid wooden floors, the willow mat breathed, providing ventilation for the sleeping area. This was critically important, as condensation from temperature differences could wet the skins and render them useless. Wood itself has low thermal conductivity, so the rods did not cool down as much as the ground or stone. The body was not in contact with the icy ground, but with relatively neutral wood, which in itself retained heat. On expeditions when it was not possible to carry ready-made mats, warriors built temporary platforms from coniferous tree branches. The branches were laid in a thick layer, creating a springy and insulating cushion over the snow. The principle remained the same: to create distance between the body and the cold source, using air as an insulator. This skill of quickly setting up camp was mandatory for every man in the tribe. The use of branches and twigs also helped to smooth out uneven terrain, making sleep more comfortable on rocky or bumpy ground. This prevented poor circulation in the limbs, which could accelerate freezing. Comfort was not a luxury, but a necessity, as a numb foot in the cold loses sensitivity and warmth much faster. Thus, the willow mat solved two problems at once: thermal insulation and orthopedic support. Surprisingly, similar designs were also found among the peoples of the Northeast, although the materials may have differed. The Iroquois used elm bark and bast to weave their mats, which they laid on the bunks in their longhouses. The principle of insulation from cold surfaces was universal across the continent, regardless of climate zone. This indicates a common understanding of the laws of physics and survival among indigenous peoples. The hard base was only the beginning of the complex pie on which a person was to sleep. Without this foundation, all the other layers of soft skins and blankets would not have been able to work to their full potential. The willow mat was the invisible hero that took the brunt of the cold from the ground. Why do you think the skill of creating such a floor covering is considered one of the most important in modern survival conditions? In the next chapter, you will learn what Native Americans used as the most perfect natural mattress. Want to know the secret that turned hard branches into a soft and warm bed? A thick layer of dry grass was laid on top of the rough flooring made of willow or branches. which served as the main insulation. Native Americans used special types of prairie grasses, such as bison grass or sage, which had unique properties. These plants had a porous stem structure that retained microscopic air bubbles inside even when dry. The layer of grass was impressive, often reaching a thickness of 15 to 20 centimeters when uncompressed. When a person lay down on such a bed, the grass was crushed but not completely flattened, retaining its elasticity and volume. This created a powerful air layer, which in terms of its thermal insulation properties was not inferior to modern synthetic fillers. Thousands of stems intertwined with each other, forming a chaotic structure that perfectly retained the heat coming from the body. The choice of grass was not accidental. Women knew which plants kept their shape better and which quickly turned to dust. Preference was given to long, stiff stems, which were collected in late autumn when they had already dried out at the root. Sage was often added to this mixture not only for volume, but also for its specific aroma. The smell of sage created an atmosphere of comfort and cleanliness in the home, overpowering the smells of smoke and processed skins. This grass mattress was regularly shaken and replaced so that it would not lose its properties and remain dry. The matted grass lost air and ceased to warm, so bed care was an important part of daily life. In the winter steppe, where grass was abundant, this resource was practically inexhaustible and available to everyone. This made it possible to renew the mattress at each new campsite, ensuring hygiene and comfort. It is important to note that the grass also absorbed moisture well, removing evaporation from the body and preventing dampness. Moisture gradually migrated through the layer of grass down to the willow mat, leaving the top layer dry and warm. This natural hygroscopic property made dry vegetation an ideal material for winter conditions. No fabric of that time could compare with grass in terms of affordability and effectiveness. In northern regions where grass was hidden under deep snow, spruce branches or dry moss were used as insulation. Sphagnum moss, dried in advance, had a phenomenal ability to retain heat, but it was more difficult to harvest in large quantities. Therefore, the peoples of the subarctic more often relied on thick layers of skins and spruce branches. However, the principle of using plant material to create dead air remained unchanged. The grass layer also served to level the surface, filling all the voids and irregularities of the willow frame. Sleeping on such a bed was surprisingly soft, and the body assumed a natural position, which promoted deep sleep. For a nomad who spent his days in the saddle or on his feet, the quality of muscle rest was of paramount importance. The softness of the bed was not a sign of pampering, but a condition for the physical recovery of a warrior. Interestingly, old grass from the bedding was often used to light fires, as it was perfectly dry. Thus, the cycle of material use was complete and waste-free, which is characteristic of indigenous cultures. Nothing was thrown away just like that. Every tuft of grass served man to the last. This technology, which seems primitive at first glance, was in fact a highly effective solution to an engineering problem. The use of local renewable resources made it possible to create comfort at any point along the migration route. Nature itself provided everything necessary for survival. One only needed to know how to take it. The combination of a hard base and soft filling created a structure very similar to modern orthopedic mattresses. Only instead of springs and latex, willow rods and dry stems of steppe grasses were used. Like this, if you are also amazed at how simple solutions turn out to be the most effective. Ready to learn about something that cost a fortune in the 19th century, but was found in every Native American home? The crowning glory of the sleeping structure was, of course, animal skins, and the king among them was the bison skin. It was not just a piece of fur, but a high-tech material created by nature for survival in the extreme conditions of the Great Plains. Bison wool consists of a thick, dense undercoat and long guard hairs, which provide double protection from the cold and wind. The Indians used bison hides obtained in winter when the animal's fur was thickest and longest. Such hides were called winter hides and were valued much higher than summer hides, which were used for Tipi skins or clothing. Processing the hides was a long and laborious process carried out by women, who transformed the tough raw skin into a soft and elastic blanket. A properly tanned hide, known as a buffalo robe, was incredibly warm and heavy. The secret to using hides lay not only in their quality, but also in the way they were laid on the prepared bed. The bottom layer of hides was usually laid fur side up to create a soft and warm surface for the body. The top blankets could be laid fur side in to create a cocoon that retained the person's body heat. The weight of the bison hide played a positive role, pressing the edges tightly together and preventing cold air from penetrating inside. An interesting feature was the ability of bison fur to regulate humidity inside the sleeping area. The wool could absorb a significant amount of moisture while remaining dry to the touch and continuing to provide warmth. This was a lifesaver, as people inevitably sweat while sleeping, and wet clothes in the cold are a sure way to death. The bison hide breathed, allowing moisture to escape but retaining precious heat inside. Special sleeping bags were often sewn from skins with fur on the inside for children and the elderly, which were the prototypes of modern sleeping bags. This design provided maximum insulation and protection from drafts that could blow through the tipi. In such a bag, a person was completely isolated from the outside environment, existing in their own microclimate. In addition to bison, bear, wolf, and beaver skins were used, each of which had its own unique properties. Bear skins were very warm and water-resistant, but heavy and difficult to obtain. Beaver fur was incredibly dense and soft, but their skins were too small, so they were sewn into large sheets. The number of skins per person depended on their status and the hunting skills of the family. A wealthy warrior could afford to sleep on a pile of 5 or 6 skins, while the poor had to make do with 1 or 2. However, the principle of mutual assistance in the tribe meant that no one was allowed to freeze, and surplus skins were always given to those in need. The skins were also used as walls around the sleeping area, hung on ropes inside the teepee. This created an additional insulated area, a room within a room, protected from the movement of cold air from the entrance. This system of curtains, known as dew cloth, significantly increased the temperature in the sleeping area. Caring for fur products was critically important. They were regularly frozen, cleaned with snow, and smoked over smoke. The smoke not only killed parasites, but also made the skin more resistant to moisture by impregnating it with tannins. A well-treated skin lasted for years, becoming a family heirloom. Bison blankets were so effective that they became a hot commodity with white settlers. Europeans quickly recognized their value and were willing to pay big bucks for them, which sadly contributed to the extinction of the bison. Why do you think natural fur is still considered one of the best insulators, despite the advent of synthetics? In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans used the architecture of their homes for warmth. An equally important factor in surviving frosty nights was the organization of communal sleeping. Native Americans rarely slept alone, especially in winter, understanding the value of mutual warmth. The sleeping area in a teepee was usually arranged in a circle around a central hearth, but family members lay close to each other. Children and the elderly were always placed in the center of the group, where it was warmest, protected by the bodies of adult warriors and women. The human body is a powerful source of heat, generating about 100 watts of energy at rest. When several people sleep under one large blanket made of animal skins, their combined heat creates a comfortable temperature even without a fire. This principle of a collective battery saved wood and energy needed to keep the fire going all night. In the harshest frosts, people were allowed to bring their beloved hunting dogs, which served as living hot water bottles. In the culture of many tribes, there were strict rules for the arrangement of people during sleep, dictated by hierarchy and safety. The head of the family usually slept closer to the entrance or to a sacred place in order to control the situation. Guests were given places of honor and warmth, which was a law of hospitality sacred to the inhabitants of the plains. This arrangement not only provided warmth, but also strengthened social ties within the family and tribe. The organization of the sleeping space also involved the use of special partitions and curtains. In large teepees, the space could be divided into sectors with skins hung from the poles of the frame. This reduced the amount of air that needed to be heated by the bodies, creating cozy and warm cells. In such a small cubicle, the temperature could be 5 to 10 degrees higher than in the main volume of the dwelling. It is important to note that the Indians slept fully clothed, but not in the clothes they wore during the day on the street. Moccasins and outer clothing were removed to allow the body to rest and dry soft items made of tanned leather were worn for sleeping. This prevented hypothermia from damp clothing and improved blood circulation during sleep. In the morning, before climbing out from under the warm pile of skins, a person had to make quick movements to warm up their muscles. This helped them prepare for contact with the cold air of the dwelling, where the fire could have burned out completely overnight. No one lay in bed idly. Getting up was quick and organized. The practice of sleeping together also provided a sense of psychological security and calm. In a world full of dangers, the breathing and warmth of loved ones nearby helped people relax and sleep soundly. Deep sleep was necessary to restore the psyche, which was under constant stress. Interestingly, this tradition persisted even in the warm season, becoming part of the cultural code. Sleeping alone was perceived as something unnatural and forced, acceptable only in reconnaissance or military campaigns. The feeling of togetherness was literally a condition for the survival of the clan. Even in military units, soldiers slept in groups, covering themselves with shared cloaks. This allowed them to survive snowstorms without shelter or fire, simply huddling together in a tight cluster. History knows examples when such living clusters survived storms that killed lone travelers. Collective warmth was a resource that did not require extraction or processing. It was always with them. The only thing required was trust and unity within the group, which made the tribe a single organism. What I am about to show you contradicts all modern ideas about thin walls. We are accustomed to thinking of tipis or wigwams as primitive huts, blown through by all the winds. However, the construction of the Lakota or Cheyenne tipi was a masterpiece of aerodynamics and thermal engineering, perfectly suited for winter. The secret lay in double walls and adjustable ventilation, which worked like air conditioning in reverse. Inside the main cone made of skins, a second layer of skin was stretched. An inner lining, approximately 1.5 to 2 meters high. It was attached to poles and descended to the ground, pressing tightly against the bedding. An air gap remained between the outer covering of the teepee and this inner wall, acting as insulation. Cold air from the street, penetrating under the edge of the outer covering, did not enter the living area, but rose upward between the walls to the smoke hole. This circulation created a draft that pulled the smoke from the fire vertically upward, preventing it from spreading throughout the dwelling. The fire lit in the center heated the air inside the inner cone, creating a comfortable temperature. The heat reflected off the sloping walls and concentrated at the bottom where people slept. Even a small charcoal fire could maintain a positive temperature when it was freezing outside. The entrance to the teepee was always oriented to the east, with its back to the prevailing westerly winds of the Great Plains. The doorway was closed with a thick skin on a wooden frame, which acted as an airtight hatch. In winter, the base of the teepee was additionally covered with turf, snow, or branches to minimize drafts from below. The cone shape was ideal for wind resistance. The wind flowed around the dwelling, pressing it to the ground rather than trying to overturn it. The stronger the wind blew, the tighter the structure became. Snow did not accumulate on the steep slopes of the roof, sliding down and creating an additional insulating barrier around the base. Adjusting the smoke valves at the top of the teepee allowed the draft to be controlled without going outside. Long poles could be used to open or close the opening, depending on the direction of the wind. This allowed the heat to be retained inside after the fire had burned out by simply closing the chimney. The interior space of the teepee was zoned according to heat distribution. Sleeping areas were located along the walls, within the range of heat radiation from the fire and heated stones. The ground inside the dwelling, warmed by the fire over the years, also acted as a heat accumulator. The Iroquois used similar principles in their longhouses, but on a larger scale. Low roofs, no windows, and hearths located along the central axis created warm areas for each family. The bark used to cover the houses was an excellent heat insulator, comparable to cork. Thus, the dwelling itself was an active participant in the heating process. It was not passive protection from precipitation, but a complex machine for controlling airflows and heat. The Indians did not fight nature, but used the laws of physics to their advantage. Do you think the principle of double walls could be applied in the construction of a modern country house? In the next chapter, you will learn how snow went from being an enemy to a best friend. For the inhabitants of the northern forests and subarctic regions, such as the Cree and Athabascan peoples, snow was not just precipitation, but an essential building material. Freshly fallen snow is 90% air, making it one of the best natural insulators. Native Americans were well aware of this property and used it to insulate their winter dwellings. In winter, they always piled a high snow wall around the base of a teepee or wigwam. This prevented drafts from below and created an additional layer of insulation for the sleeping areas located near the walls. The thicker the snow wall, the warmer it was inside as the snow retained the heat coming from the dwelling. In emergency situations, when it was not possible to build a proper dwelling, hunters dug snow caves or trenches. The temperature inside a snowdrift, heated by the warmth of a single human body, rarely drops below zero, even if it is -40 outside. This physical property of snow has saved the lives of thousands of people caught in bad weather. They knew how to build temporary shelters under the overhanging branches of fir trees covered with snow. This created a natural chamber, protected from the wind and heat loss. Inside such a den, they lined the floor with pine branches, and it was possible to wait out even the most terrible storm. It was important to ensure that the snow did not melt from body heat and wet clothing. To do this, there always had to be a layer of insulation between the snow and the person, skins or branches. The ability to balance between warmth and dryness was the main art of survival in the snow. Sometimes water was deliberately poured onto the outer surface of the temporary shelter to create an ice crust. The ice protected against the wind and made the structure stronger, acting as a windproof membrane. Inside, the porous structure of the snow was preserved for warmth. The Athabascans used sanitary snowshoes not only for walking, but also as a tool for compacting snow under their campsite. Compacted snow sank less under the weight of the body in the fire, creating a reliable platform. Knowledge of the properties of snow allowed the Indians to travel light without carrying heavy tents. The forest provided poles and firewood, and winter provided building material for walls. This made them incredibly mobile and independent of external conditions. Snow was also used to clean fur clothing before entering a warm dwelling. Shaking off dry snow in the cold was easier than drying melted water inside. This rule was strictly observed by everyone, from children to the elderly. Thus, the harsh winter presented not only problems, but also solutions. All that was needed was to change one's attitude toward the cold and learn to see snow not as death, but as shelter. The question of what exactly Native Americans slept in their dwellings often provokes heated debate among historians and survival enthusiasts. The answer lies not in the fashion trends of the time, but in the harsh and uncompromising pragmatism of nomadic life. Sleeping completely naked in conditions of extreme cold and danger was unreasonably risky. In the event of a sudden night attack by an enemy tribe or a fire in the camp, a warrior had to rush outside instantly, ready to fight or flee. On the other hand, sleeping in heavy outer clothing was categorically impossible. During a long working day, it accumulated moisture from sweat and dirt, losing its thermal insulation properties. Therefore, the Indians had a unique and well-thought-out set of changeable home clothes. Similar to modern pajamas, the basis of this set was special light moccasins and soft leggings made of perfectly tanned leather. These shoes were worn only inside a clean dwelling, never going outside in them. They were always dry, clean, and warm, allowing tired feet to fully rest from hard walking shoes. Feet were the main priority in the thermoregulation system, as cold always starts with the extremities. The Indians knew that if the feet were dry and warm, a person would sleep soundly and not feel cold even at low air temperatures. Long, loose shirts made of the finest deer skin or old soft fabric were often used as underwear. They were cut so as not to restrict the movements of the sleeping person at all. Such clothing worked on the principle of modern thermal underwear, effectively wicking moisture away from the body. At the same time, it retained a layer of warm air around the skin, which acted as insulation. It was extremely important that the clothing did not constrict the blood vessels with elastic bands or tight seams. Free blood flow throughout the body was the only way to deliver internal heat to the fingers and toes. In severe frosts, when the temperature in the teepee dropped, the head was always covered with a fur hood or a soft hat. An unprotected head loses a huge amount of heat, acting like a chimney. The neck was often wrapped in pieces of soft fur, creating a sealed warm collar. The exposed face was often generously smeared with animal fat, such as bear or beaver fat. This was done to prevent painful chapping and drying of the skin from constant smoke and cold. The fat film acted as a protective cream, retaining moisture in the skin. Daytime clothes, wet from snow and sweat, were never thrown in a pile in the corner at night. They were carefully hung on special poles at the top of the teepee above the fire. There, under the dome, the warmest and driest air rose from the hearth. Thanks to this, heavy items had time to dry completely and become warm overnight. In the morning, people put on warm, dry clothes, which was a guarantee of cheerfulness and health for the whole day ahead. Putting on a cold and damp shirt in the morning meant getting sick. Special, careful attention was paid to drying the inner padding of outdoor moccasins. Dry grass, sedge, or bison wool was used as insulation. If this natural insulator remained damp from the evening, it would turn to ice by morning. Walking in such shoes guaranteed rapid and severe frostbite of the toes. Therefore, every family evening began with a ritual check and drying of the shoes of all family members by the fire. There was a unique system of hygiene and warmth for babies. Dry sphagnum moss and cattail fluff were used in cradles as disposable, eco-friendly diapers and insulation. These natural materials had a fantastic ability to absorb moisture and retain heat. A child in a portable cradle was literally wrapped in this plant-based absorbent material and tightly swaddled in soft skins. This allowed the baby to stay dry and warm throughout the long night, despite their natural needs. Women kept a constant watch over the condition of their husbands' and children's clothes. They quickly repaired any tears and holes that appeared during the day right by the fire. Any tear in clothing, even the smallest one, was a dangerous leak of precious heat, which was unacceptable in winter. A sewing kit with bone needles and tendons was as important a survival tool as a hunting knife. Sometimes, for extra comfort, smooth river stones heated by the fire were placed under the feet of those sleeping. They were first wrapped in pieces of thick leather or old fabric so as not to burn the feet. It was an ancient, safe, and effective heating pad. Stone has a high heat capacity and retained a pleasant warmth for several hours at a time. Such comfort allowed the muscles to relax and a person to sleep deeply even in severe frost. The entire clothing system was multi-layered and modular, allowing for flexible heat exchange regulation. An Indian could easily remove or put on an extra layer of skins without even getting out of bed. All he had to do was pull on the desired skin in the dark. It was perfect control of the microclimate at the level of intuition and muscle memory. External insulation with skins and teepee walls was certainly important, but the main and only source of heat in harsh conditions was the person themselves. Without knowing biochemistry, Native Americans intuitively and accurately understood the deep connection between nutrition and body thermoregulation. They knew that a stove would not heat without firewood, and the body would not heat without food. Therefore, the winter diet of the indigenous peoples of the plains was radically different from the summer menu and was aimed at one goal. That goal was to obtain as much pure energy for heating as possible. Before bedtime, when the fire began to die down, they often ate the legendary pemmican. It was a high-calorie concentrated mixture of sun-dried bison meat and melted internal fat. Sometimes sour berries were added to it, but fat always remained the basis. Fat was the main fuel for the body, which worked like a coal briquette in a stove. It began to digest and burn slowly, releasing a huge amount of heat throughout the long, frosty night. This kept the body temperature at a safe level, preventing the person from freezing in their sleep. It was a so-called long-burning fuel, unlike fast carbohydrates or sugars. Carbohydrates provided a quick but very short burst of energy that faded after an hour, leaving a person alone with the cold. Fat, on the other hand, provided stable and steady heat until morning. The amazing ability to digest such a huge amount of pure animal fat was the result of thousands of years of adaptation and training of the stomach. European travelers who tried to switch to such a diet often suffered from severe stomach and liver disorders. For an Indian, however, eating a piece of pure fat at night was perfectly natural. It was perceived as the equivalent of throwing a large, heavy piece of coal into the furnace of an internal stove before going to bed. The body switched to active thermogenesis mode. Water balance also played a critical role in heat conservation, which is often forgotten by modern people. A body dehydrated in the cold inevitably thickens with blood, which begins to circulate less efficiently through the vessels. Thick blood does not carry heat to the extremities, and the fingers begin to freeze first. Therefore, drinking warm herbal teas or simply hot water in the evening was a useful and necessary habit. This warmed the stomach from the inside and replenish the loss of moisture that evaporated when breathing in the dry cold. Pine needles rich in vitamins were often brewed. The basal metabolic rate of people living permanently in nature was significantly higher than that of modern city dwellers. Their bodies worked in an intensified force mode, producing more heat even at complete rest. This was a necessary biological adaptation to the constant, round-the-clock cold exposure of the environment. In the morning, immediately after waking up in a cold dwelling, it was vital to restart this metabolism at full capacity. Hot fatty food or strong meat broth was the first thing after lighting the morning fire. This helped to quickly warm up from the inside and drive away the remnants of sleep after coming out from under warm fur skins. Breakfast was the starter for the engine. The Indians, accustomed to deprivation, were not afraid of feeling hungry during the day while traveling or hunting, but they tried never to go to bed on an empty stomach in winter if there was any food available. They knew that a hungry person freezes and dies much faster than a well-fed one. An emaciated body simply does not have the internal resources to keep itself warm and succumbs to the cold. Food was perceived in this culture not as a pleasure, but as fuel for life in the struggle against death. Hunting in winter was incredibly difficult and unpredictable due to snow and animal migration. Therefore, the main strategic reserves of pemmican were made in advance during the warm and abundant autumn. Having large reserves of fat in the teepee was the only guarantee of warm and safe nights for the whole family. The true wealth of the tribe was measured not in gold or jewelry, but in heavy leather bags of pemmican. This specific diet, rich in protein and fat, also strongly supported immunity in the absence of fruit. Getting sick in winter in a nomadic lifestyle was deadly for everyone, so food also served a preventive function. The connection between food and warmth was so obvious and inseparable that sharing food meant sharing life. Feeding a random guest fatty food before bed was not just a matter of etiquette or politeness, it was a manifestation of the utmost care to ensure that the person survived the night and woke up in the morning. The factor of physiological adaptation should not be overlooked. Native Americans lived in conditions of temperature extremes from birth, and their thermoregulation worked differently than ours. What is deadly cold for modern humans was simply fresh weather for them. Children were hardened from an early age by not wrapping them up excessively and allowing them to run barefoot in the snow. This trained their blood vessels and formed so-called brown fat, a special tissue that effectively generates heat. The body learned not to shiver and lose energy, but to activate chemical thermogenesis. Psychological resistance to cold was no less important. They knew how to endure discomfort without panicking or tensing their muscles. The ability to relax in the cold is a paradoxical but effective skill that conserves energy. They knew the limits of their bodies and knew when to stop to warm up. No one acted heroically for no reason, risking frostbite. Caution and respect for the cold were signs of wisdom, not cowardice. Genetic research shows that the indigenous peoples of Siberia and North America have mutations that help them tolerate the cold. But genes alone, without practice and everyday technology, would not have produced such results. It was a combination of biology, technology, and culture. Their bodies were tools tuned to survive in this particular environment. They sensed the slightest changes in the weather and reacted to them in advance. Predicting a blizzard allowed them to prepare firewood and reinforce their dwellings. Sleeping on a hard surface was also a matter of habit. Their spines and muscles were adapted to hard floors. A soft mattress might have seemed uncomfortable and caused back pain. This harsh lifestyle shaped their character, stoic, patient, and resilient. They accepted the world as it was, without complaining about the weather. Complaining about the cold won't make it any warmer, but adding more firewood will. The story of their survival is a story of the incredible adaptability of the human species. We are capable of living anywhere, from the equator to the Arctic Circle, if we use our minds. The legacy of these skills is still alive today in the cultures of northern peoples. And although modern materials are now available, the principles of insulation and energy conservation remain the same as they were 1,000 years ago. We have examined a complex and sophisticated system that allowed Native Americans to sleep comfortably where others could not last an hour. It was a combination of engineering, knowledge of materials, and a deep understanding of physiology. From willow mats to bison robes, from teepee architecture to fatty foods, each element of this mosaic worked toward a single goal: preserving precious heat. It is amazing how this ancient knowledge resonates with modern survival rules. The layer cake principle, insulation from the ground, wind protection. All of this is the basis of any modern tourist or military person. History shows that technologies change, but the laws of physics and the needs of the human body remain the same. Which of these technologies did you find most ingenious? The grass mattress or the chimney design in the Tipi? Write your opinion in the comments. I will be very interested to read it. And, of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new dives into the history of everyday life that is not written about in textbooks.